So for those who are just tuning in, we welcome you. Today's program is sharing spiritual stories and journeys and paths, as we do from time to time in WCC Spiritual Enrichment. And our presenter today is new WCC member, Shelley Longmuir. Shelley, can you begin by telling us about how you grew up in terms of faith, religion, and spirituality?
Sure. And if you'll indulge me, I have some printed notes, which I may refer to occasionally after. I'm going to blame it not on age, but on chemo. You know, my memory isn't as great as it used to be, so I don't want to leave anything out. So grew up in Wilton, Connecticut, and both parents were heavily involved in the church. My father was an usher and a deacon for 30 years. My mom was a deaconess, a lay preacher, a Sunday school teacher, and at one point superintendent of the Sunday school when there were 450 children.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, both my brother and I were baptized, confirmed, sang in the choir, took piano lessons from the music director, and cue the next slide, participated in the Christmas pageant.
Oh.
Periodically, we would have family treks into nearby New York City, and we would visit Marble Collegiate Church to hear Norman Vincent Peale, or go to the Riverside Church to hear William Sloane Coffin and his then quite novel sermons on social justice. But the Norman Vincent Peale message of the power of positive thinking was really the framework for my worldview and was ingrained in me and just part of our family fabric. And I thought you were going to say a little bit about that.
You're right. You're right. How many of you remember the name or the person, the message of Norman Vincent Peale? I found a little 7-point summary of the Power of Positive Thinking, his most famous book, which dates back to, can you believe it, 1952, which when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s was still influential, at least in my household. So here are the 7 points, quick summary. Expect the best and get it. Believe in yourself and everything you do. Develop the power to reach your goals. Break the worry habit and achieve a relaxed life. Improve your personal and professional relationships. Assume control over your circumstances and be kind to yourself.
That says it all. It really does. Thank you. Well, this framework was buttressed and coupled with my mother's practice from the 1940s when she went out to California with reading the Daily Word, which was a meditation pamphlet put out by the Unity Church, which was a non-denominational Protestant church, which was less part of her practice, but it was really the Daily Word publication, which was really very much a set of affirmations and meditations that were meant to be empowering and positive, and so therefore very much buttressed the Norman Vincent Peale message. And as Jeffrey read at the beginning of our gathering, that particular Daily Word meditation was one which during my illness was extremely challenging to adhere to let go of my desperate need to be in control, but also the reminder to know that there was no place that I could be that God was not. And so at moments, I'm sure you remember this one in particular, when I was, you know, on a gurney about to go in for another procedure and was really on the precipice of just, I was now launching into this next phase of treatment. it really enabled me to just exhale and turn things over and do what was my job to do, which was to take good care of myself, to relinquish the steering wheel of my care, if you will, to my very capable husband, and to really learn how to receive from my friends and certainly from our son, who was ministering in his very own deep and profound way to me. But I went off to college with a subscription to Daily Word, and it has been a part of my daily, I would say just my daily quiet fabric of being a Christian. In talking about the church, I'd say the second tentacle, if you will, was that quite serendipitously, or perhaps not serendipitously, the church provided a way to give me some great comfort when my mom suddenly died in 1994. There was a freak storm around that time in Wilton, Connecticut, with high gale force winds. And as you saw in the very beginning of the slides, there's this very tall steeple and this gorgeous, truly very old weather vane. And it was absolutely toppled and destroyed during the storm. And so our thought was that we would repair and rebuild the almost 200-year-old weather vane and give that as a memorial tribute to my mom. And as I jokingly referenced my husband, perhaps not so jokingly, it was the perfect tribute because my mom would be atop it all and giving directions to everyone. No, I think actually if we scoot forward, we have the, so here is a copy of the plaque that sits in the entry, the narthex, and then the next slide actually shows you the sanctuary, and so it's just in the archway before you enter that area. So, and then I would say, I can impose it back up to Jeffrey, here we go. And then I'd say the third strain of influence that the church had was an inspiration for a budding new career for my mom. About 20 years before she died, she discovered and studied quite seriously watercolor artistry, and she actually became quite notable in the New England area, painted this, which was turned into a lithograph, which was tremendously successful. And one of those lithographs is in the permanent print collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So just in summary, the church gave us our religious training, our framework, helped give me great comfort with a memorial tribute to her. And then lastly, really was, I think, a real source of inspiration and helped launch her into this next very exciting and fulfilling for her phase of being a watercolorist.
And can you say a word about this? This is not the one from the Met.
No. This is actually the original watercolor from which the lithograph was made, and is actually not very widely seen because it is the original, but it is home and hangs in my home office and is a lovely reminder of a lot of different influences as well as moments back in Wilton, Connecticut.
Thank you for bringing it today.
Yes,
that's very special.
Thank you.
So let's fast forward now.
Okay.
Through a lot of years and decades through your career and semi-retirement, and share with us about your very serious life-threatening battle with a rare and incurable form of leukemia, which began in 2019, just 3 years ago.
Yes.
And how did your faith support and guide you during that process?
Well, I would say October of 2019, was a real upside down period for our family. I had had some, curious symptoms of just being profoundly exhausted and tired. Finally went to the doctor. The next thing I knew, I was in an emergency room getting blood tests. And the next thing I knew after that, I was in an ambulance heading to downtown Chicago to a hospital. And apparently, they never know how you actually contract leukemia. They don't, some kinds of genetic, mine was not. But I had, and I like to say that in the past tense, had a very rare form of adult ALL leukemia called hypodiploid B-cell leukemia, which was so rare that it was frankly not deemed worthy of research because the population was not big enough. So there was no data and no treatment protocol, and therefore no cure. And this guy right here to the right, my husband, overwhelmed me with the depth of his love and his tenacity, absolute tenacity, in finding the best research hospitals in the US that had a leukemia department that focused on very much cutting edge treatments. And quite fortunately, one of those research hospitals was our very own University of Chicago Research Hospital with a renowned doctor who heads the hematology and leukemia department, Dr. Wendy Stock. And over my vehement objection, demanded we go get a second. And throughout all of this, he exemplified calmness, tenacity, focus. And I felt that I really needed to dig into my faith and really try and display and model grace and faith. If I panicked, how could my husband and my son not similarly do so? And from, a source I cannot name or identify, I was just extraordinarily felt at peace and calm. And I knew my husband had my medical care fully by the throat. And I had a job to do, which was to take the best care I could of myself. And I really tried to channel that power of positive thinking from Norman Vincent Peale. And I felt I needed to make myself a vibrant illustration of faith and optimism and a certainty that God had a plan for me. I just didn't know quite what it was yet, but he had a plan for me. And I will say I had, I read my daily word. I tried to affirm the power of healing through a newly rediscovered, very close, precious friend who was a cancer survivor. She told me about how meditation had really helped her. I took an online course for meditation, which I still practice, sometimes not as routinely as I'd like to, as my son can tell you. And at that point, I began online church shopping. And I did it from my hospital room on the isolation floor at the University of Chicago, and I really felt like I needed to repop myself, as Pastor Jeff Braun would say. I had not been to church for many, many months by this point, probably 6 to 7 months, and I had not a contact from anyone at my prior church, and I really felt marooned. And then, thanks to a former fellow parishioner, Annie K. Taylor, who just called me spontaneously, was not aware that I had a health issue, just called me and we started to talk. I told her I was, watching the online services, and she helped set up a call for me with Pastor Jeff Braun, with her involved, because it would have just been too hard for me to do this out of the blue, just to call and start to talk to someone. And she made it such a lovely and meaningful connection. And she did it with such love and empathy. I shall always be grateful for that. But the qualities of the sermons, the intellectually challenging prayers, the divine music, it was this refreshing, re-energizing worship experience that I was now having. And rather than going to church out of duty, I felt like I was really looking forward each Sunday to worshiping online. And it became part of one of those critical punctuation points of my week. So, I will say, as the medical crises ebbed and flowed, a heartbreaking relapse, preparation for stem cell treatment, which is really like exacting nuclear winter on your body through chemo and steroids. I, began the journey, but felt more like I had company along that pathway. And I really remained determined for my family to come through with grace and strength to model I think the real power and comfort of faith.
And speaking of your family.
Yes.
What's been the impact on your son, David, who's with us today, and your husband, Jonathan, throughout all of this?
I can't talk.
And do you want to change any slides or look at any slides right now?
I think at this one, I'll actually ask you to advance it. It should be, thank you very much. That was just a picture of my mom for a publicity photo for the lithograph of
I see a resemblance. I know. And I knew I wouldn't be the only.
I did too.
Wow. She's OP.
It's a little bit out of order, so I'm going to ask you. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. Could you skip forward one, because I think. Yep. There. Okay, so this is our son, David Christopher Rand Feld. And when we got into a longer, stable remission, my son asked me earnestly what explained my sense of deep faith and serenity and calmness. And this wasn't an academic question. He was genuinely curious about this. And when you think of, what are the unexpected blessings of something bad that happens, that question and the ensuing conversations we had around that were one of those blessings that I think back to. I explained that I truly felt that God had a purpose for me, that I was in the process of discovering what that was, and that I really felt very much comforted and felt calmed in a positive way. That I had a job to do. I needed to take my medicine, eat, which was not necessarily high on the list, sleep, and be an accurate, objective reporter to the doctors of what was going on. David looked for creative ways to accompany me on that journey. And when he was away in Berlin in the fall of 2019, when I first contracted leukemia, he made playlists for me and of very new artists that I had never had any exposure to, that he had either discovered in Berlin or that he thought I should know about. And he made these playlists so that I could play them while I walked the isolation floor doing laps, trying to get in my 2 miles a day and keep up my strength. And we FaceTimed constantly while he was away and discussed the artists, the music, the lyrics. I still don't understand or like rap. But it was just a wonderful way for me also to learn how to be a better listener, how to become an active listener, and to be curious about learning from this fascinating young guy who really had morphed from being our child who needed our constant direction to really having an honored seat of observing his life. So I could go on with countless other examples of the tender ways that he ministered to me when he came home and I was recovering from chemo side effects. He would just sit in the guest room where we put in blackout shades so I could sleep, and would just sit there and do his schoolwork so that when I woke up, I wouldn't be alone. So, this is, another example of out of bad comes good, which is a phrase that you've heard me reference already, but a very dear friend who you'll hear about later is her daily mantra. So, and I think because every photo has a backstory, if you can click to the next slide, this is what transpired moments before that photo was taken. And David was so happy I was finally able to get on a plane and travel to New York City and see him. He spontaneously was giving me a kiss on his midget mom's head. So now if I can impose him, Jeffrey, go back 2 slides to the one with Jonathan. So as regards my husband, words simply fail me. And if I embarrass Jonathan today, my mission is accomplished. Yes, I married my best friend, and yes, we've had each other's back through career challenges and issues dealing with our respective families, but his dedication and relentless support and really endless search for cutting edge treatment for me is the only reason I am here today. It is not an exaggeration. I was on not a great trajectory and was not having a creative, novel treatment for a chemo-resistant leukemia. And I think his selfless protection of me when I was at my weakest and really couldn't do much to safeguard myself from either endless procedures, blood tests, appointments, whatever. His sense of humor was always what got us through the day. And one short anecdote, we're down at the University of Chicago, a little bit of a trek to get there from the North Shore. I can't tell you, the scores of times we went down there. We were down for a bi-weekly exam and blood tests, and we're in an exam room, and the medical team is there, and Jonathan is explaining some side effects that I'm having to some of the medicines. And I, never wanting to appear vulnerable, nor like a complainer, said rather sharply, "They aren't that severe. I'm really doing just fine." And Jonathan just sighed and turned to the lead doctor with whom we were now on a first name basis and said, "Wendy, it's been a very long pandemic." And everybody in the room bust out laughing because they too certainly felt that very same way. So simply put, after 40+ years of being together, I had that rare opportunity to fall in love all over again with this amazing man.
So you have been through life-threatening illness and an experience of healing, a second chance in some way. So how does this affect your life today, spiritually and in daily living? And how might you even be called to give back in your many remaining years?
I think first and foremost, I take nothing for granted. And every day is a gift. Every interaction is just a treasure, whether it's the joy of being able to move again and to exercise and to be pain-free, whether it's, this crazy bevy of birds descending upon our bird feeder, whether it's, a rambunctious wild puppy that we, in less astute moments, decided to welcome into our home. Each moment is a gift, and I try and treat it as such. With respect to the second part of your question of how am I being called to give back, I think surprises are endless. I have been asked by the Hematology and Leukemia Department at the University of Chicago to be on call to counsel other patients facing stem cell transplants. And because it is a long process and procedure, the interactions have been multifaceted, I would say, and it has been extremely rewarding. This year I've had the honor of speaking with 5 different people who are on various journeys through this kind of a health challenge. So that has been exciting, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. And then also serendipitously, or perhaps not so serendipitously, Jeffrey has asked me to be part of the Care and Calling Ministry, which I've just gone through that training, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
And we're glad to have you. Thank you. Yeah. So after all this, what kind of insights do you have about wise living?
Oh gosh. Well,
And you want any slides in there?
At this point, we're going to get to a whole bunch in just a moment.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you
Tell me
for
when.
that reminder. So, first and foremost, waste no energy saying, "Oh, woe is me," but rather start to look for, out of bad comes good. Where is that unexpected blessing that is just around the corner? So that, and again, through, Norman Vincent Peale, it's not so difficult to find those positive rays of brightness in one's life. And the second wonderful benefit is how often in life do we get a do-over? I mean, I have a chance to really be a better friend, learn how to be a better wife, though I'm close to perfection, right? And to be a better mom. And those are, gosh, that is such a blessing to have the advantage of, another shot at doing that better. And so I would say I get to savor my friends and hopefully enrich the lives of others doing so. But one of the things that has been a big learning of that is my friends and people who came forward that I never would have expected. I told very few people about my illness because it just made it too real, and it became too relentless in needing to bolster them. I feared, which was not the case, but I also tend to be a fairly private person, so I really didn't tell very many people. But I was fortunate enough to, there was a description in the New York Times, if you'll allow me, of how someone defined friendship and how it impacts their life. And this woman who had quite a serious illness in her family, said that she was on a sinking ship. She shot out the few flares I had and was hoping my friends would come find me. And they did. You cannot buy that kind of support at any price, but you can invest in it over years of friendship beforehand. So I was hoping that I did have some of those friends that I could call upon, and I will ask you to advance to the next slide. Back one. Okay, and this is me with a very dear friend of ours at her 80th birthday. And she is now a retired federal judge. Prior to that, she had an illustrious career in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey. She hired my husband. He worked for her. She got elevated to the bench. He lobbied for me behind the scenes and said, I have a girlfriend who, loves to be considered for a clerkship. And so Mary Ann interviewed me, made the very bad decision and hired me. And therein began an extraordinary friendship. And she ultimately married Jonathan and I. She is our son's godmother and has been really a truly phenomenal friend. And we have spoken at least once, now twice a week, for years and years and years on the phone. And initially it was for me to repay her incredible kindness to me, because she really, clerking for her, had changed my life and my career. And then it had this wonderful, flexible component of, we called upon each other when we had needs to vent, to just flex with the issues of life. And she is also of Scottish heritage. She lives in New York City, attended the Marble Collegiate Church, and she was a very close friend of Norman Vincent Peale. And so we constantly sprinkle our conversations with, out of bad comes good, the power of positive thinking. And she was a tremendous support and a deep comfort and solace to both Jonathan and myself during the 3 years of my treatment. And when we would come out from doctors' meetings and we would be in the car driving back to the North Shore, we would call her on the car phone and tell her what the doctor said. And she was just there in so many ways and was a particular comfort to me as we talked about life, religion, and being together, mothers of only one child and a son, and how special that kind of a bond is. So I gained new appreciation for the complexity and intensity of her devoted friendship. So the next, please. So this is a friend, and I actually have a photo album that she made for me. And I'll give you the context. I'll pass it around if you'd like to look through this. This is a friend who now lives in Paris, who got on a plane the day after I called her in October of 2019 and told her of my illness. And she flew to Chicago and walked into my hospital room at Northwestern Memorial and sat with me for a day and talked about just our friendship, our many years together. And this book that she had put together was really a testament to that varied relationship and all the fun things we were going to do together. And she has called or texted me daily since that day in October of 2019. And she immersed herself in learning about my medications, about the side effects from the more than 14 spinal taps I had, the various procedures I was undergoing, and actually read the 70+ page document that the University of Chicago gives out on stem cell transplant. But she would remind me of my life outside the medical netherworld and help to plan for future trips together. And we have truly, through my illness, become sisters. And not that I'd ever had a sister before, so that was really quite a treasure. And this next slide, this is my cherished college pal who evolved into even more of a precious friend than I could imagine. And yes, indeed, become my other sister. And Leslie has endured a lifetime of illness. She has been relentless in her support and encouragement. And from special food she shipped me when I was undergoing chemo that she knew that I would be able to tolerate, to cuddly, warm, and funny bed socks that made me laugh, to calls to vent over the latest political news, or sending me a video when walking outside with her cane to a spring-fed stream, to take a video to send me in the isolation floor at the hospital so I could have a little bit of nature. So her love and empathy have no limits. And the story behind this photo is, since I could no longer have any kind of plants or flowers because of the bacteria threat and my suppressed immune system, she would regularly send me virtual bouquets in front of the latest artistic creation of her husband, a professional artist. So this was a feast for my eyes on many levels. And then this next slide is, okay, and this is my last, okay, so I don't normally point out my red bum, but I'm the one with the red windbreaker around their waist. And this is about the surprise nurturing of my motley crew of rock climbing buddies. So this gaggle of guys weekly rotated calls to me to remind me that I could successfully summit and beat leukemia. And when I had a heartbreaking relapse, my closest buddy wrote to me, "Oh my, so you scale a mountain, look at the sun, take a deep breath, and then realize that there's another hill to climb? You can make it just as you have before. I know exhausting, but we are there pushing and pulling you along. Guarantee it. Prayer machines getting cranked up again." So here's to a long encampment on Mount Remission. So, and here is the last photo, which is taken from July 22nd, 2022. And my dear friend Leslie sent me this marvelous balloon bouquet to celebrate my 2 years in remission, a critical milestone. So I'll close with my motto shared with the medical team of the University of Chicago. Onward.
Kelly, that was very inspiring. And there are so many points of contact, I'm sure, between people in this room and your story. But we're going to hold it in our hearts and minds for our futures, which are always unknown and uncertain. And perhaps we'll be able to apply some of these concepts and realities and spiritual practices if and when we need them, because life can be like that. I'm going to invite everybody at home to join us here by stopping the share screen. And David and Jonathan, I know you weren't expecting to be asked to say a word, if you'd like, about your mom and wife's journey and your response to it. But I'd like to begin our discussion time by doing that. David, do you have a word to say maybe about what your mom's journey has meant to you If you don't, that's okay. I'm putting you on the spot. And likewise, Jonathan, what's this experience been like for you? Who, are either of you willing to go in this direction? David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to go first. Well, first, hi everyone. Happy Sunday. I'd say obviously there was and is a certain removal from the immediate effects of my mom's cancer, which is something I'm grateful for to a certain extent. Also, though, can only speak to, again, a certain level of her journey. I'd say the benefits, obviously, you know, none of her qualities, at least from my eyes, appeared for the first time during the fight with cancer. You know, there's a certain strength and resilience, which proved itself very valuable, though it has never not been there. And I'd also say, to wrap it up, that a blessing of the whole experience is that I've gotten to know my mom's history much more intimately throughout the whole journey, and obviously listening to the stories you want to pass down, do pass down, and you know the values that, when it really boils down to it, are the things that, you know, life or death, you wanted to make sure I knew or had in my life.
Thanks, David. That's beautiful. John?
I think that Shelley is one of the most courageous people that you'll find. You know, sure, whether her positive attitude should come from her or religion, we don't agree on a lot of these kind of topics. Yeah, the two things, if I did so well as a husband, I'd like to be paid for them. But on a more serious note, she is one of the most, at the same time, strongest, but also most courageous and compassionate people. And those traits came out, and luckily she took some of that compassion to herself. Her achievements and kind of getting through the she's been.
Yeah. Right. Well, that last point of the Norman Vincent Peale summary is self-compassion, self-kindness, which is still overlooked on spiritual journey. Yeah. But how can we be kind to others if we're not kind to ourselves? We don't really love ourselves and take care of ourselves.
Very well said.
I'd like to open it up to anybody else who has a comment or question about Shelley's journey.
Quite a journey. Very successful. Yes, absolutely. Shelley, thank you so much for sharing this. We're glad to have you here. One thing that struck me so profoundly was when you said, help me with the words, that you wanted to make yourself a vibrant illustration of faith and grace and calmness of that sort. Yeah. And ever since you said that this morning, I've been thinking about that, because it seems like that in itself would require so much from within, and so much strength and energy. This kind of normal situation, but particularly in yours. And what struck me is also the extent too to which that can be self-care, right? To feel that presence of God, to enable you to do that. And thank you for that image and those words.
Can you say the phrase one more time? Yeah.
I don't know it verbatim,
Yeah.
but what struck me was, she felt she was called to be a vibrant illustration of her faith in God's grace.
Right. Really to show not just my family, but also others who, you know, it could have been a pharmacist, it could have been a nurse, it could have been anyone, but you know, the power of my faith to enable me to put one foot in front of the other and do it with a degree of calmness while listening for, I think, direction, because it took it out of myself. You know, it wasn't, but, you know, I don't want this to any way be pompous, but to be a tool to illustrate to others the power of faith and the certainty of it.
People are always looking at each other. Like, how do we make sense of life? You know, and we don't think we're looking at each other, but we are. We are social creatures. And that goes for the spiritual side of our being too. So how would I respond here? So we're all looking at each other, and you today put it all out there for us. And that's brave of you to share your story, but we're the ones who benefit. Although I think you also mentioned that it's beneficial for you.
Absolutely.
To put this in a summary form.
Oh.
I can imagine that.
Yes. Oh, I mean, it was
When we tell our stories, it helps us see our story
definitely.
more clearly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anybody on Zoom have a comment, question, contribution? It's okay if you don't.
Can I just add one last point?
Of course.
Which was the overarching scripture that I probably know one scripture, but it is the one that is on the Longmuir family plinth and the Wilton Cemetery, and it's just one that's always given me deep, deep reassurance, and it's from 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse to 18, and it's the things that are seen are transient, the things that are unseen are eternal. So for me, you know, the love of my family, my love for them will always be with them, whether I am here or not, and I positively know that they will feel that. So that was something that was also
Beautiful.
a bracket of support.
Beautiful. And it's been a joy to get to know you better, and you know, these conversations we've had about our presentation today. Your presentation.
Well, our discussion.
Yeah, right. So, anything else?
I want
Yeah,
to thank you. I want to thank you for putting together so wonderfully insightful presentation.
Oh,
It's
thank you, Josh.
very rewarding, for at least for me to hear. You know, I want to thank you, but you must have spent an extraordinary amount of time putting this together. It's so well crafted.
Well, thank you. I said to Jonathan that I wish I had met Jeffrey earlier in my career, because boy, he had this very beautifully organized and orchestrated and time checks. It was wonderful.
Speaking of which, look, it's 9:45.
Oh, right on time.
Go in peace.
And I just like to,
One more thing for Annie Kate.
over this Zoom, I'd just also like to thank David for being here with us.
Yes.
And also Jonathan for being here
Yes,
today.
indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Go in peace, friends.